Welcome to Peak, Train Like a Girl, a podcast by girls in sport, for girls and coaches in sport. We're here to amplify your voice. It deserves to be heard. At Peak, we are a safe place for girls to hang out, learn, grow, and build community. We empower girls in sport and coaches with knowledge, resources, and support we think is necessary in today's athletic environments to thrive. Join us for bold conversations about the experience of girls in sport. Our discussions will make you laugh, cry, cheer, get frustrated, and hopefully rethink the future of girls in sport for generations to come. Whether you're walking, commuting, cleaning your bedroom, moving into a new dorm room, take us with you. Follow us. It helps more than you can imagine. Check out our website and make sure you share with a female athlete or coach you love. Now, I can't wait to introduce you to our next guest, Heidi. Heidi and I actually briefly met at a workshop with WILDWOOD Running back in August. But I was so impressed with her thoughtfulness around conversations around nutrition and fuel that can be super hard. She's a registered sports dietitian. She'll fill you in on some of that. But I just loved how approachable she was, not just from a personal perspective, but also from a professional perspective. I think one of the things that gets super hard with girls in sport is all the confusion around food and fuel. And she just was able to simplify it and make it super digestible and super approachable. So without any further ado, Heidi, are you ready to get warmed up?
I am ready.
Awesome. All right. Cat or dog?
Dog. Oh, 100% dog. No question, dog.
I kind of scoped you out on social media, so I thought that was going to be your answer.
My dog is my life.
I love that. This I'm not sure about. Beach or mountain?
Mountains.
Nice. Movie or series?
Oh, it depends.
Okay. You want to clarify?
I think maybe partly how much time I have. You know, a series oftentimes like it's half an hour, 40 minutes versus movies are an hour and a half, 2.5, 2 hours. So maybe that.
I love that.
Or just if I'm into a series, then usually that's like all I want to watch. But if I don't have a series that I'm watching, then I might opt for like a one-off movie or stand-up comedy show or something like that.
Love that. All right, Taylor Swift or the Beatles?
Ooh. I might have to go with Taylor Swift.
Nice. I love that. Okay, summer or winter Olympics?
Summer.
Nice. Awesome. Did you love watching the Summer Olympics this past time?
Oh my gosh, I was glued to my laptop. As you may know, soccer is my background, and even though running is now my primary sport, soccer is my favorite sport to watch, hands down. So I watched lots of soccer, and then gymnastics. Yeah, I mean I could go on and on. I'm a huge Olympics fan. So
yeah, it was super awesome. And the women's soccer team, U.S. soccer team, had a ton of success after like some controversy, right? And so I thought that was just kind of super interesting to watch.
Yeah. The new coach has done pretty incredible things with the program, and after the World Cup this past summer, having their worst finish ever, I think there was a lot of pressure on the team to perform. So it was really fun to see them play like they did.
Yeah, I agree. And I really connected to her, the coach. I'm glad you brought her up, because one of the things that I'm passionate about at Peak, and we just talked about this a little, is keeping girls in sport, but also giving opportunity for girls in sport. And that would include head coaching position. I don't think people realized how few female head coaches are out there. And so I just thought it was so awesome to see that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that's super cool. So the soccer to running pipeline, it's real, right?
I'm not an anomaly. It's like comically common.
It is so comically common. It does. It actually kind of cracks me up a little. So I know a little bit about your story. So before we dive into your profession and some tips that we can help fuel girls for sport, I would love for you just to share a little bit about your journey, maybe even starting with that transition from soccer into running in college, and kind of bring us up to speed to where you're at now.
Yeah. So yeah, I started playing soccer at a very young age, 3 or 4. My dad was my coach, and it just kind of became eat, breathe, sleep soccer. I fell in love with the game very, very early. Luckily, I had a really good sport experience as a kid. I definitely can't say that like I had negative sport experiences probably until college, which I think I do feel really lucky about. I played multiple sports through high school, but soccer was kind of always my favorite. It was my biggest passion. I knew I wanted to play in college, maybe beyond college. And so but it never run outside of like running on the soccer field or the fitness that we do for that. And so I got a scholarship to play at Seattle Pacific University. So I moved up to Seattle, played soccer for essentially 3 years, my full freshman and sophomore year and junior fall season. And when I got to college, the team soccer dynamics weren't what I was used to on my high school and club teams. There was definitely conversation around, fear around gaining the freshman 15. And it was like more clicky than I was used to. The coach definitely played favorites. Like it was a really big change from my high school experience, both with my club team and my high school team. And so pretty quickly, it didn't feel the same for me. I did also start running. A couple of the girls on the team would run on our off days, and so I started doing that and really fell in love with that. Unfortunately, I think there was this combination of, moving to college and the stresses that come with that, and then a lot of the negative conversations around body and fear of, weight gain or body changes, and which now in my job, it's just like I tell so many athletes and parents and coaches, like, you need to gain weight from high school to college, whether or not you're an athlete. Like that is part of that pubertal development. And if you're in college, if you weigh what you did in high school, like that's kind of a problem. And there's so much fear around gaining weight in college. Yeah. And so I think like that in combination with the coach and I not really jiving, and then finding running, and kind of it became a coping mechanism. It became a way to make up for the fact that I wasn't, getting as much playing time. And so I kind of started to develop an unhealthy relationship with exercise as well as food, and had a really successful actually beginning of my sophomore year. I was a starter and then ended up with an injury partway through the season. It took me out for a few weeks, and in that time, the coach put in kind of one of the freshmen. We had a pretty young team that year, and I really didn't see much playing time after that. His kind of perception was, hey, this younger player is going to give me more years. I'm going to work on developing her instead of this older player. And so, like, that was really hard. I'd always been, a star on the team and club and in high school. And so, again, like, mentally, that was really challenging. Again, I think I felt I didn't have, control. And that's where control over food, like being able to run, really came in. And then it just became a vicious cycle where I wasn't eating enough. I was running too much on the weekends or on like even on practice days. And so I'd show up to practice pretty exhausted. And so I wasn't playing well. But in my head, and this is something that when I'm working with athletes, I see so often in the middle school level, at the high school level, at the collegiate level, is they're overtraining because they think that's dedication. They're not eating enough because they're afraid of body changes, and they're not performing well. And they think the reason they're not performing is because they're not fit enough or whatever. And so they just keep doing it and digging themselves into a hole when actually the problem is they need to train less anymore. Sure. And so I definitely got stuck in that cycle and ultimately transitioned out of the soccer team at the end of my junior fall season and walked on to the track and cross country team. There were several girls on the team who, after they were done with their senior fall season, they would do one season of indoor and outdoor track. And I had really learned to love running. I started even getting into trail running and was like, hey, that's something that I would really like to do. And so I emailed the coaches. They let me walk onto the team, and I kind of hit the ground running, no pun intended. And so I did junior year, winter and spring track. And then my senior year, I did cross country and then the winter and spring track. And I just fell in love with it. And the team just felt so much more like home. I felt like I belonged. I didn't feel kind of like an outsider, ostracized. It wasn't cliquey. It was just a really, really incredible, very family-like environment, which is really what I needed because that was my experience with sports when I was younger.
Sure.
And unfortunately, despite that, like I really carried over some of those disordered habits into running, and it was just kind of fuel on the fire. With the world of running, especially at that time, there was talk of, racing weight and definitely a lot more emphasis on body. I was getting a lot of comments from people that I grew up with, whether it was friends or teachers or whoever, commenting on my body and like how much weight I had lost. And even if it was out of concern in my head, that's what I wanted to be happening. And so it just kind of furthered some of my not great habits. And then I wasn't a runner. And so I looked to my teammates and my coaches of like, what does it mean? Like, how am I going to be good at the sport? And I think, again, kind of saw some really unhelpful habits when it came to especially relationship with food, looking at my coaches, looking at some of my teammates. And I did really well. I was newcomer of the year. I made, regionals. Like I was really talented and kind of took to it really quickly. And unfortunately, that also kind of fueled that idea of, oh, like how I'm eating is working. And like what I'm doing, this is what it takes to perform well. And for me, I just hadn't fallen off the cliff yet. And I think there's a big part of me really wishing that I had suffered a bone injury or something like that early on to kind of help me realize that maybe what I was doing wasn't accurate. I lost my period my freshman year in college, but at that time, nobody talked about periods. My doctor put me on birth control to quote unquote get it back. Yeah, I know. And I was 18. Like, I didn't know that that's like not actually a real thing. So I was on birth control for 10 years and never had a period and was always told that that was okay. So I think I also harbor a lot of a lot of anger for that. But yeah, anyway, so I graduated, I continued running. I grew up in the mountains outside Salt Lake City, and so the mountains have always been like deeply, deeply a part of my happiness and joy and soul and who I am. And so I very quickly shifted to longer distances, got into trail running, ran my first ultra the summer after my senior year. And yeah, now still I trail and ultra run. It's definitely my favorite activity, no question. It has been very toxic at certain times in my life, but I have I am now at a place where like I feel comfortable running and it's no longer, disordered or anything like that. So, but as much as I love running, I think there still is for me, there is there's a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth when it comes to the running community just because of the culture of the sport and how it was really unhealthy for me for a while. And so when I was going through, I went to eating disorder treatment, which I'm sure we'll talk about. I had to try and figure out, had to untangle my love of running with my eating disorder and kind of ask the question of, can I actually get back to running in a healthy way? Or is it always going to be disordered for me? And differentiating between running versus racing and what does that look like? And so yeah, that's kind of where we are now. I run. I just like to spend time outside. So I mountain bike, I gravel bike, I road bike, I ski, I rock climb. I just like to move my body outdoors. So
yeah, it's so interesting. There was a lot there, and some of the things that I want to ask you questions around. But I want to focus on the fact that you said you were angry, and I'm so relieved that you said that because a lot of people don't talk about that. I think when people think you talk about anger, you're looking to blame somebody. And we have a very similar story, but different. I mean, I grew up in a culture, in a home where, thin was in. I mean, I remembered the first time my mom called me fat. I mean, like, and exercise wasn't something that I did for pleasure. I did it for the calories in versus calories out. But I found so much pleasure in it. And SLC is like one of my favorite places in the world. I spent a lot of time outside of Salt Lake City growing up, and I loved being outdoors. And I went through some of the same struggles that, I wanted to love this thing called sport, running, trail running,
Mm-hmm.
skiing so much. I mean, before I would go skiing, I'd get up and run 6 miles, I mean,
Yeah,
crazy
yeah.
stuff like that. But it took away the love of the sport for me. But one of the things I had to do as an adult when I gained relationship with food and movement was to stop measuring things. I don't know how far I run. I don't over data collect. And that's something I really try to work with even my athletes with. But I was also angry that there was so much misinformation. I mean, when I would lose weight or had lost weight, there were so many compliments around what I quote
Mm-hmm.
unquote looked like.
Yep.
Um, it was staggering for me. And I
Yeah.
never pieced together, nor did any doctors piece together infertility, not menstruating, multiple
Right.
stress fractures. It's hard. And so one of the things I want to do now is start the education process earlier, because by the time you get to college, like you and I, it is so much easier to take those disordered patterns into full blown behaviors because we don't have accurate information. So the question I want to ask you is, what can we be doing in middle schools and high schools to give people more accurate information about menstrual health, fueling for both pre and post activity, but also talking about food and food being part of community? And, food is something that should be celebrated, which is different than fuel, like fueling a workout or fueling after a
Yeah.
workout.
Yes.
So, what are some of your thoughts there?
Oh, that's just like such a big rabbit hole. I think I think a lot of it does. I mean, unfortunately, like there is so much generational passing down of what the nutrition gospel was per se in like the parents' generation. And so, I mean, I do think some of the biggest problems are things like social media, are parents who, whether it's not even talking about their kids' bodies, but just commenting on their own bodies or having their own
Sure.
disordered behaviors with food. Like I see that so often where parents aren't doing things intentionally harmful to their kids or talking about their bodies or their food, but the kids are observing how the parents are engaging with food, engaging with exercise, talking about those different types of things, talking about their bodies. And they learn from watching their parents' relationship with food, body, exercise. That's where they pick up a lot of those messages. And I think that presents a really big challenge. I do think when it comes to schools, I still think it's so interesting, you know, whether it's, middle school, high school, or otherwise, that coaches are required to do things like concussion training and, things like that. And it's like, I just had another coach send me a message and be like, I just want to let you know, I just had to do this is a track and cross country coach, and my mandatory concussion training. Why am I not doing REDS training or eating disorder
Same.
training?
And not only
And
that, but all 71 of my athletes have to take that concussion training.
exactly.
Kidding me?
Yes. And that's like, it doesn't matter what state. I think like coaches and athletes have to do like, I don't know. And this is something that I think about and talk about a lot. And I have not yet actually made the steps to do it, but I really want to talk to, at least in Washington where I am, like talk to, the cross country track and field association, just talk to the general coaches association, say, hey, like let me record a 15, 20, 30-minute video on REDS and it becomes mandatory training. Because I do think so much of it starts from the coaches and the coaches' awareness of what language to use and not use, the coaches' awareness of signs and symptoms of underfueling or REDS. And just because so much of that does get normalized in sport, things like being fatigued, having stomach issues, low iron, like all things that get normalized, but can be fixed with adequate nutrition and being able to stop things before they get serious and lose their period or have a bone injury. So I think coach education is really important. I also think and I don't necessarily know the layers of how this would happen, but I also see a lot of harm coming from health teachers where again they're teaching from old textbooks, they're using problematic language, they're demonizing food when they're talking about nutrition when they're on their nutrition unit. I've had parents let me know that health teachers had everybody in the room weigh themselves, put their weight up on the chalkboard, calculate their BMI, put that on the chalkboard, and then they did a statistical assessment of who was in the range of underweight, normal weight, overweight, obese.
Oh,
And so problematic.
sure.
And so I think, social media is always going to be there. It's hard. I do some parent work, but it's hard to get to the parents. But I think especially from that school structure, if we can educate coaches and provide some type of, just make sure that what is being taught from a nutrition standpoint, again, maybe teachers are also getting I have never been, I've taught in college for 1 quarter, but in teacher training, have all of the teachers get eating, I don't know, eating disorder training, and same thing, right? What language do you use? And so, because those are some of those adults that have a lot of power over our student athletes, and there's a lot of trust in those, adults' knowledge and things like that. So I think that's probably where we'd get a really big bang for our buck if we could figure out how to do that in a streamlined way.
Yeah, I agree. And Megan, if you want to unmute at any point and jump in, because I know Megan comes from swimming, and to be honest with you, swimming and running aren't that far apart from each other in relationship to body image, over exercising, under fueling, but also some of the, same thing, strategies like why are swimmers taking concussion? And listen, concussions are serious, and neither you or I are not saying that they aren't. That's not
Right.
the point. It's
for sure. Yeah.
issues with a 15-year-old swimmer or cross-country girl.
Exactly.
That's the
It is
problem.
more likely that they will develop REDs versus get a concussion. Yes, concussions are serious, and we should know about them.
Yeah.
REDs and eating disorders are the deadliest mental health condition that exists.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely. So, Megan, do you have anything you want to jump in there and ask or say? Because I know you've got some of the same thoughts.
Yes. Most definitely. Heidi, your story has been so interesting. There's been so many things that I've definitely experienced myself and heavily related to. So when I was going off to college, my freshman year at the University of Kentucky was where I originally started, but I had lost my period for over 2 years, and it was never even a conversation of it was a bad thing. It was just oh, that's okay. I had no information on it. I didn't even know it was ever a problem. So I just kind of, went about my normal life for 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
There were so many things where maybe was that why I was so tired here, or I stopped being able to lift so much then, or I didn't perform here. And there are just so many things now that I still look back on. I'm wait, this equals that equals, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's just so fascinating. And it's, it's so beyond upsetting for me as well, because I just don't understand how that is not a basic, at the very beginning conversation that I would have had with someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why we're here. We're here to give information and education. I think that what we're all saying is that there are so many fingers that can be pointed. I mean, even things like one of the things we talk about, our parent meeting is coming up, and we talk about language. So we say, we don't tell an athlete they look fit. We tell an athlete they are fit. I mean, it's a simple switch, but it makes such an impact, I mean, when people talk about quote unquote healthy food or quote unquote clean food, it's okay, now you're demonizing, whether it's lack of access or whether it's given the choice to, I know, your favorite food is a Pop-Tart, which is hilarious because my favorite food is a Pop-Tart.
Yes.
So, and it's and you can feel people looking at you as you're pulling out your Pop-Tart, and they have their $7, organic sourced, bar made from Himalayan salt in the Indies. I mean, I'm making, but you get my point. I mean, okay. At some point.
Yeah, and I do a comparison with athletes, with coaches, with parents of foods that society labels as junk and foods that society labels as clean or healthy. And one of the things I compare is a Pop-Tart to like one of the organic Nature's Bakery fig bars.
Yeah.
Because pretty much everybody that I work with feels totally comfortable having one of those Nature's Bakery bars before training, but so deeply uncomfortable having a Pop-Tart. And I show them the nutrition facts, and they are literally identical. The calories, the carbohydrates, the added sugars, which is usually a big fear for people, the added sugars are the same. They are the same. And, you know, the protein, the fat, etc. And to help people realize, like, your body can't read packaging. Like, your body doesn't know that something is labeled Pop-Tart or Nature's Bakery. It just knows it's getting X many grams of carbs and proteins and fats, etc. And so why are we spending so much extra money on this? Or why is there so much mental anxiety over this when it's like your body literally doesn't know the difference? Like research shows that our body doesn't know the difference of, you know, two things as long as their macronutrients are the same. So as long as they've got the same carbs, proteins, fats, vitamins, and minerals, etc., our body responds in the same way from a performance standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, from an inflammation standpoint. So anyway, that is a large soapbox that I get up on a regular basis.
And it's interesting because when we're specifically talking about sport or girls in sport, we're talking about, you know, there are, you know, 3 meals a day. So that's food and it's communal and it's social. One of my biggest pet peeves is that the only time our student athletes can see the trainer is during their lunch period. And my big thing is what student athletes need to be doing during lunch is eating lunch and socializing with their friends. Period. Like that period to me. Like
Yep.
that is it. But aside from those 3 meals, having conversations around fueling for workout and then fueling to recover after workout are something I really struggle with, because if you're looking at the equation, most people are looking at activity in today's culture is the formula. You move this much, and those Fitbits, my worst, those things drive me up a freaking wall. How many steps did you take? I don't know.
Oh, they're terrible.
They're the worst.
They're absolutely terrible.
Oh my gosh, it is like it's a mental mind game, but what would you give from a tip perspective when we're talking specifically about fueling for activity and then fueling for recovering from activity? What are some like general tips that you give people, especially athletes who are on the go, or a high school student who leaves for school at 6:30 in the morning and then doesn't come home till 6 o'clock at night?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's definitely, you know, I tell athletes, parents, coaches that student athletes, like middle school, high school, are the most unintentionally underfueled group that I've ever worked with. And I've worked with professional athletes. And a lot of it is the school schedule. I think it's a big part, it's lack of time, school schedule, and lack of education. You know, fear of having stomach issues is another big one, why people don't eat right before exercise, but they're not told that actually not eating is going to be more likely to cause stomach issues than eating. As long as we're eating things that are going to be beneficial. You know, we don't want, you know, things that are really high in protein, really high in fat, or really high in fiber, because all those things take longer to digest. Mm-hmm. And so having a chicken Caesar salad 30 minutes before exercise it's not a bad food. It's just that's not the right timing. And that's so often what I talk about with people is, yeah, there aren't good and bad foods, but there are certain times where it's better to eat certain foods than others. Like broccoli's great. Broccoli's not great before exercise. Like that's just the reality of it. And so I think, you know, after school, before practice, having something that is like easy to digest, simple carbohydrates. And that can be a lot of different granola bars. It can be things like a Nature's Bakery fig bar. It can be a Pop-Tart. It could be a couple of Chewy bars or the Nature Valley crunchy oats and honey granola bars. Granola bars can be great because they're, you know, shelf stable. They don't get smashed. They're easy to eat. They're quick to eat. You know, you can also do something like graham crackers, a handful of gummy worms, banana, as long as it's not going to get like smashed in your bag, which is sometimes the hang up there. But again, like easy to digest carbohydrates. The one thing to look out for with bars is I see a lot of athletes actually now gravitating towards protein bars before. And one, protein bars have too much protein before exercise. They're usually not high enough in carbohydrates. And again, protein takes longer to digest. And so that's going to be more likely to cause stomach issues. The other problem with protein bars is they usually have artificial sweeteners or sugar alcohols that are also known to cause things like bloating, gas, diarrhea. And so, having a protein bar after exercise potentially can be a great choice when paired with some carbohydrates. But before practice, protein bars are not the best option. So that's before. And, it doesn't have to be, big. It's just, something like a granola bar, like a couple applesauce squeezes or an applesauce squeeze and a packet of fruit snacks, or applesauce squeeze and some pretzels, again, anything along those lines. And then finding what works for you. Some people, it's different for everybody. I love bananas, but I've found that a banana right before I train just doesn't do it for me. I eat bananas all day long except for right before exercise. And then afterwards, again, it's like kind of having something to fill the gap between finishing practice and when you get home. Because most athletes are not getting home and eating dinner within 30 to 40 minutes. And we really want to get something in our bodies within that 30 to 40-minute window, just because it's going to be better for our recovery. It's actually going to allow us to adapt to the training that we did. I have a lot of athletes talk about certain foods undoing the work they did in practice or undoing their fitness. And I let them know, actually, the only thing that can undo your fitness is not eating after exercise. Like that will make those, like that work that you did in practice you won't adapt to it. You won't improve from it if you don't refuel your body. And so normally I kind of recommend a combination of carbohydrates and protein after exercise, but something is always better than nothing. Carbohydrates should be prioritized over anything, but some protein in there can really help as well. I'm a huge fan of shelf-stable chocolate milk. Throw one of those in your bag. But again, it can also be something like a granola bar, peanut butter pretzels, some trail mix, anything along those lines. Again, like carbohydrates with a little bit of protein can be a really great choice. And again, doesn't have to be huge. It's just bringing your body's stress levels down and your stress hormones down, bringing your cortisol down, and starting that recovery and repair process to kind of carry you over to dinner.
Yeah, I love that. And there were a couple things in there that I thought that was great. I love the idea of not a good or a bad food, but it's about the timing of the food. I think that's so awesome. And I love the fact that you called out what you shouldn't say, but also recognize that timing does play an issue. I thought that was so awesome.
For
and
sure.
Just the idea that the only thing that quote unquote undoes anything is the not recovering. So not eating enough to recover. I think that's awesome. Those are, I think, two things that I think are super simple for coaches and caretakers to have in their back pocket. I know we're getting ready to wind down, but before we do that, and I know that, you are not a doctor and you don't play a doctor on TV, but I would like to talk about the correlation between underfueling, over exercising or overtraining, and specifically for a female losing their menstrual cycle. So if you could just sum it up and for just a minute or two before we go through our cool down, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, so it ultimately comes down to, sometimes someone can lose their period because of, just underfueling, just overexercise, just really high stress loads. But it's generally a combination of all the things. And ultimately, what it is when our body is underfueled, that is stressful. And when we're overexercising, or even if we don't perceive it as overexercising, but if we're not eating enough to meet the demands of our training and also just maintain basic organ function, that's where we start to see some of those problems with relative energy develop and losing our period. And because we are exercising and not eating enough, that energy is going into exercise and we don't have enough left to maintain our basic functions, including things like building bone, supporting our heart health, maintaining a menstrual cycle. And so our body starts to shut down some of those non-essential systems to conserve energy because it's being starved. And even if we're not intentionally starving ourselves, our body doesn't know that. And so, we don't need a menstrual cycle to stay alive. And so our body's like, hey, this system, not necessary. Like, we're not going to waste energy doing it. And so we start to see those hormones decrease, and our menstrual cycle might get irregular. That can be things like our period can get lighter, our cycle itself can get longer or shorter, or it can go away completely. And that is where we kind of start to see some of those problems, especially if it lasts more than 3 months. We see really notable declines in bone health, as well as things like heart health and heart function, among other things. And some people lose their period right away when they're kind of in that imbalanced state of energy intake and energy output. Other people, it can take months or years, or they might never lose their period. I have worked with athletes who have a diagnosed eating disorder and are very, very, very underweight and still have a period, which is like wild to me.
Yeah.
But it does happen. And so I think it's also important to understand that just because you're having a period, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not underfueled. Like, there are a lot of other body systems that can be affected, because I think sometimes there is this language of, oh, like, I will lose my period if I'm underfueled, and that is the sign, where your body, like, that might be a really late sign, and like maybe ideally we're catching this like underfueling before it gets to those late stages. And so, yes, while losing our period can definitely be part of that, it's not always one of the first things that happens. And for some people, it just doesn't happen at all because just their unique individual body. So, but yeah, that's kind of a very kind of surface level description, like kind of that process and what goes on.
That's a great point. And I love that you brought that up, and you can still be underfueled and overworked and still have a menstrual cycle, that other things may show up. So thanks for point. I think sometimes we don't talk about that piece enough.
Yeah.
Oh, let's move into our cool down a little.
Great.
Because I could talk to you for the next 7 days, and I know you have places.
Yeah. We can do a round two.
Exactly. All right. So what food do you wish was portable enough to eat on a bus after competition?
I feel like I make any food portable enough to eat on a bus after competition. It's just like, I mean, for sure, I think there's things that are more challenging, but I do, put something in a Tupperware and bring like a cooler with an ice pack, and you can really make anything portable.
True.
So, I mean,
I think French fries are something that don't transition well.
that's true. Yeah, they do need to be fresh. Although leftover French fries with eggs the next morning,
ooh, yum.
That's a good way to use leftover French fries, I must say.
That's going to keep that one.
Maybe the one thing would be like ice cream, because it would melt. And I love ice cream. So, I mean, you can go out for ice cream, but it's not like you can bring ice cream with you and keep it in the bus for after the game.
Okay, that's Megan.
So maybe that's my answer.
That's what Megan picked. She picked an ice cream sundae.
Yeah. It's just milk soup.
Exactly. All right, Heidi, who's your favorite female athlete right now?
Oh, jeez. My brain wanted to search for someone on the U.S. women's soccer team, just because I'm just such a fan of everything that they represent. I mean, I think the U.S. women's national team as a whole is just incredible for what they've done for equal pay. And yeah, just the way they've transformed the game. If there was one athlete, I would probably say Simone Biles. Actually, recently watched her documentary, and I think she's done the way that she has opened up conversation for prioritizing your mental health, and that mental health is physical health, really at the highest level of sport. She pulled out of the Olympics to prioritize her health, and she has gotten so much backlash for that. And then to come back this year and do as well as she did, I just think is really cool. So I just have a lot of respect for her being able to recognize this is not smart. And I think because there's so much glorification in the world of sport, in any sport, there's so much glorification of athletes pushing and no pain, no gain and suffering. And I think that's really problematic. The fact that most athletes to some capacity need to be able to dissociate from their bodies in order to be good at their sport. And so, yeah, I just have a lot of respect for her being able to be at the highest level of sport on the world stage in front of the entire world and say, no, like my mental health is not where it should be. I'm not doing this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a good answer.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, last question. If talent were not an issue, what sport would you love to excel in?
Oh, gymnastics. 100%.
Love it.
I
Awesome.
talk about this every time the Summer Olympics comes around because I watch what they do and I literally cannot wrap my brain around it. Like the way that they can, like on the floor, the way that they run and then just jump.
I know.
And they get so I can't. Like it literally baffles me. Like I cannot comprehend what they do with their bodies. And I just think they are probably some of the most impressive athletes that are out there. So
I agree.
definitely gymnastics.
It's so funny. Our daughter is a college lacrosse coach, and that's her thing too. She always says to me, "Why didn't you put me in gymnastics?" Oh yeah, that was the problem. I didn't put you in gymnastics.
Right.
Well, thank you, Heidi, so much.
Of course.
We
Been
are
awesome.
absolutely going to have you back. So thanks for
let's do it.
out there. I'm going to take you up on it.
Perfect.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We are so glad that you are here. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, share our episodes with a female coach or athlete that you love. We're so glad that you're here, and we are so glad to be having conversations around girls in sport. Can't wait till next time.
Okay, that was so awesome, you guys. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God, Heidi, I have to tell you,